Perfect. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Cord Bucher. I'm the Deputy Director of Youth Development Oregon, and I'm going to kick us off with this evaluator training today. Go to the next slide, please. This is a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. In just a second, I'll provide some information on how this presentation works, how we'll capture your questions and respond to them. We'll give you a little bit of background on the Youth Development Council Division, this particular grant. RFO Overview will go into some detail about what the Job and Work Readiness Grant is that you're here to learn about reviewing. We'll give you some guidelines and general concepts on grant evaluation, and then get into more detail about the scoring process and leaving comments. We'll show you a little bit about how SM Apply, our review and application platform, works. And then we'll close out with just some general information and where you'll be able to find all the resources during the time that you are evaluating these grant applications. Next slide, please. So while this session is happening, please keep your microphone muted. If you have questions or comments about the presentation materials, please use the Q&A function. You should be able to see a Q&A button down on the menu bar on your Zoom window. It's got a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. If you use that for questions about the presentation contents, we'd appreciate it. That way others can see questions. You'll be able to ask us questions about if you can't see the presentation or there's other technical problems. You can use the chat for that. So the chat is really just if you're having trouble with Zoom itself. Otherwise, questions about this presentation, please go in the Q&A. Next slide, please. In that Q&A, there's some cool features that we think might be helpful. As you look in there, you'll see an option to toggle between a question you've submitted, and you can see all the questions that everyone's put in. You can add comments to questions. You can upvote questions, which is helpful. If you see a question that you also have or are very curious about the answer to, use that little thumbs up button to upvote it. And then, of course, you can submit a new question at any time. And we will be checking the questions or the Q&A periodically. There'll also be some times during the presentation we'll pause to take questions if folks want to submit them, and we'll try to respond to all of them as we work our way through today's evaluation training. Next slide, please. We thought it might be helpful to just address some things right up front that folks might be wondering. How you'll receive applications to evaluate. So everything happens within the SurveyMonkey Apply or SM Apply site. We'll give you some instructions on how to register and access your applications later on in today's presentation. You'll have about 3 weeks to get your evaluations done. Assignments should be added to SM Apply around July 10, and then we propose to have scoring due by Thursday, July 31st. Those dates could move a couple of days out if there's a delay in getting everything loaded, but we'll communicate with you about that if that happens. Each evaluator is estimated to get about 8 to 12 applications to score. We estimate that will take about 6 to 10 hours total. I do think that once you've done a couple, it goes a little bit faster when you get used to the process. Evaluators are, you all complete your evaluations individually. We don't have any required additional meetings. We no longer have tabulation meetings where we have to schedule for you and other reviewers to get together to go over your scores. So you'll be doing everything on your own in the SM Apply system. So are your scores and comments shared with the applicant? Yes, all scores and comments are made available to the applicants. We'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the presentation. How do you reach out with questions during the evaluation period? Well, there's 2 ways. There is a form where you'll be able to submit any questions. And we, YDO staff and the ODE procurement single point of contact, we all monitor that form. I'll show you how that works later on. You can also always email Bethany Moreland, the single point of contact that we'll introduce in a bit. And then a question that a few folks had just about the grants, how much funding is available for each of these grants. So the award limit for a single grant ranges from $150,000 to $300,000 for a 2-year grant. But as a reviewer, you're not evaluating budgets or the funding request, and you're not even going to know the amount requested. But I think some folks just were curious for context, the size of these grants. And so there you have it. So just wanted to make sure we covered these, as these are pretty common questions. And this slideshow, this presentation, it will all be available for you to access later on throughout the evaluation process. We have a page on our website with all evaluator materials, and we'll share more about that later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Here is a slide with just a list of the staff who are involved in this process. You'll be hearing from a few of us over the course of today's presentation. Tanasia is operating the slideshow, and she and Melissa are here to kind of help out with any technical issues you have. So if you do have any problems seeing this presentation, if you're not seeing the Q&A button, anything like that, please use the chat to let them know, and they'll be monitoring that throughout. And then the next slide, please. Our single point of contact for this procurement is Bethany Moreland, who we'll introduce in a little bit. So if you request any questions or have any issues, if you submit something through the help form, Bethany is most likely going to be the person to get back to you with an answer. And you can email Bethany at any time with any issue you have around the evaluation process. And next slide, please. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Youth Development Oregon for folks who are not familiar with us. So the mission of Youth Development Oregon is to align systems and invest in communities to ensure equitable and effective services for youth ages 6 through 24. Throughout Oregon and tribal nations, we support educational and career success, disrupt youth crime and violence, and affirm youth strengths and safety. And our vision is that all of Oregon's youth have the opportunity to thrive and achieve their full potential. And this grant is one of the ways that we carry out this mission and seek to fulfill this vision. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sally, who is going to share some information about the Job and Work Readiness Grant, the goals and purpose of this. So Sally Deck, would you please hop on and take it away?
Thanks, Cord. Hello, everybody. My name is Sally Deck. I'm a grant manager here at YDO. And I'm going to talk through some of the details about this specific grant. So the Job and Work Readiness Grant is new to YDO this year. And so I'm hoping that this will be an opportunity for people to have some familiarity with it. Also know that there are a lot of resources on the YDO webpage about this specific grant, about each of the grants, and that those resources will be available to you. This slide deck also will be available to you afterward. So I'm gonna kind of breeze through these slides, and you can know that this resource will be available to you afterward. So the overarching goals really are around YDD's intention that the youth who participate in the grants are able to become increasingly capable of obtaining a job and having subsequent and more advanced training or education that would prepare them for future opportunities to thrive in the workforce so that they can ultimately be self-sufficient and ultimately self-actualized. So the intent is that the programs focus on youth with demonstrated need, particularly the youth who are disconnected from school, who face complex individual or systemic barriers to post-secondary transitions, and/or youth who are employed in jobs that don't have a clear path to living wage opportunities. So we're really looking at what are the elements that are required for these youth to be supported and have adequate youth development to succeed in the workforce. Next slide, please. Another piece of this grant is that the grantees, successful applicants, will become participants in Oregon's statewide youth re-engagement system. For those of you who are familiar with the re-engagement system and the legislative mandates around that, this will be pretty clear, but the overarching goals for everyone to know is that it's about reconnection to education, high school completion, career pathways and that post-secondary education and training, and then collaboration networks. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but it is important for folks to know that grantees, successful applicants, need to be aware of the educational status of the youth that they're serving and actively support them in completing high school or the equivalent if the youth haven't already done so. For the youth who've already completed high school, this requirement shifts that grantees need to support youth to access whatever educational services would be appropriate for that youth, either in partnership with an educational service provider or within their own organization. So a key element here is around partnership and collaboration between the workforce development providers and educational service providers. And that collaboration networks is a piece that is key to the work that YDO does across the state. So to reiterate, applicants absolutely can serve youth who have already completed high school. And in that case, they would be just providing or offering access to other post-secondary education. And another key piece is that applicants that offer the industry recognized credentials are considered to meet the requirement of providing or offering access to that post-secondary education. We'll get into some more of those definitions in just a moment. Next slide. So overall, the scope of this grant means that grantees need to offer two things. And the first is training of the essential employability skills. And the second is either paid work experiences or training that results in an industry recognized credential. And the definitions for these terms are going to be on the next slides. And another key term that's defined is youth furthest from opportunity. So for this grant, the primary age range is 16 to 24 years old. And successful applicants should be able to clearly demonstrate how that age range is targeted. Younger youth may be approved on a case-by-case basis by the grant manager, and that's something that would happen after the grant was awarded and would be handled again in small numbers. The intention is that youth in this grant will be 16 to 24 years old. Next slide, please. So the definition of essential employability skills is in the RFA, and you are welcome to read that. We invite you and hope that you do enjoy some thorough reading of the RFA. But it's really detailed, and I've got two slides here that will show some of the key elements that we're highlighting. You'll note that the list says that we say that this is a list of items that are included but not limited to the following items. And this is because we know that some youth demographics, all youth demographics, are unique, and some will have certain needs that we want the applicant to have a chance to explain. So you'll see that the pieces on here that, again, are really focused on youth development in general: creative problem solving, communication, flexibility, dependability. Those are elements that are really bundled into that youth development piece that is key to all of what YDO does. Next slide. And the other piece of the essential employability skills that you'll see on this slide, things like financial literacy, managing interpersonal relationships, ownership of one's public representation. That piece means how youth engage with social media in public ways, or public-facing jobs like customer service, and how a youth knows then how to present to the public and how that differs from how they might present to their friends. And that's a key piece when we look at essential employability skills training, that youth are aware of how they are perceived in public and how that is different from their personal relationships. And then we also note culturally responsive and or industry specific skills, because we again recognize that there are skills that are really specific for some youth to learn that we aren't going to mandate that all youth learn, because they might be specific to an industry or something that would be culturally responsive for youth to be able to benefit from. The training for all of these skills should be done in a manner that focuses on the development of the young person in a youth responsive and developmentally appropriate manner. Next slide. All right, paid work experience. When we are talking about paid work experience, we look at jobs that can include part-time work or full-time work. It can include pre-apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships, paid internships, and other opportunities where youth are paid and can learn transferable skills that apply to that job, that apply to future jobs that they might have. But the key piece obviously being that it's paid. Next slide. The industry recognized credential is a little bit more complicated, because we define it really specifically as a certification or a credential that leads to living wage employment. And so you'll see in this definition that the youth must, upon completion of this credential, be qualified to attain employment. And so this is where we're drawing some lines that if the only quote unquote credential that a youth is earning is something like a food handler's license, that would not be an industry recognized credential that leads to a living wage job. It might be an element of someone's paid work experience, and that would totally be an appropriate thing for the youth to gain in conjunction with a paid work experience. So pre-apprenticeships and registered apprenticeships are registered with the Bureau of Labor and Industry. And again, that there can be more educational components in these industry recognized credentials and pre-apprenticeship or registered apprenticeship programs. There is not a requirement that the youth be paid while they are earning the certificate. Next slide. Youth furthest from opportunity. Again, this is another like complicated and deep definition. What we really mean is that the intended demographic for this grant is youth who face barriers to success in education and employment. Youth for whom it's difficult to complete high school, we know and we've seen it is difficult for them to enter and succeed in the workforce. And we know there are a lot of reasons why youth have challenges finishing high school, and that many of those continue on as they attempt to enter the workforce. And we recognize that there are additional supports that are appropriate for those youth to have. And that is why they're specifically called out and defined in this grant. And that's the end of my slides. If we go to the next slide, I think we'll see it's a questions slide, and we can take a break to take any questions. And Cord, I think I'm going to turn it back to you. Unless
Sure.
there are
Thanks,
questions
Sally.
that just I should answer.
And the only question we had was just about where to get slides after the presentation, and there will be a page on our website where this deck and other resources will be posted, and we'll share that a little later on. I do have a clarification. I noticed in our award range that we actually, the lowest award that someone may apply for is $100,000. So I had the range of maximum awards, but grants, may be applying for anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000. But I think the important thing to recognize is that you as evaluators are not having to look at budgets or assess whether the budget aligns with the services, but really you're just going to be reviewing the evaluation items and applying the rubric. And looking at the other materials we identify in this presentation to assess these applicants. So at this point, I think I do pass it over to Bethany Moreland. Can we see the next slide, please? Yes. All right. Bethany, take it away, please.
Thanks, Cord. Again, I'm Bethany Moreland. I am the OD Procurement Officer and single point of contact assigned to this RFA, as well as the other two RFAs that YDD has open right now. So there's a good chance that we have already exchanged emails or will in the future. So I will be speaking about a little bit about conflict of interest, and then also some things to keep in mind as you're going through the process. You will receive from me in the very near future an email requesting that you complete the conflict of interest form. On that form, we will include the list of applicants, the organization names that applied for the ROG grant. But the important thing that you need to keep in mind is that the state of Oregon defines conflict of interest as actual or potential, as well as from the perspective of financial interest. So an actual conflict of interest would speak to there being a financial interest that would take place if you were to evaluate a certain organizations, versus potential would be there could be financial interest. And it's important to note that the financial interest can be both positive or negative for yourself, a relative of yours, your business, a business of the relative. So keep that in mind, because a lot of people have the assumption that when we talk about conflict of interest, we're talking about knowing an organization, what work they do, potentially you've worked with them in the past. And that's not how the state sees conflict of interest. It's more about financial interest. So you, on that form, you'll identify if you have any actual or potential conflicts of interest, and you can provide me with information there on the form or via email. And if there's anything that you're unsure about whether it constitutes an actual or potential conflict of interest, by all means, flag that for me and we can have a discussion there as well. Note that I need to have these conflict of interest forms filled out, signed and dated prior to evaluating any applications. Next slide, please. So this is just on the right is an example of the final page of the conflict of interest form. You'll receive the conflict of interest form saved as first name, last name, JWR conflict of interest. I think I might have just previously misspoke and said ROG. If I did, we're in the JWR presentation. But it'll come through first name, last name, JWR conflict of interest. Please swap out that first name, last name for your first name and last name. Page 1 through 3 will go through the rules and expectations around conflict of interest. For 4 and 5, approximately, will contain a list of applicants, and the final page will be the attestation and the signatures. I have an example on the right. Please note the green arrows throughout. Oftentimes, people will miss checking a box, and then I'll have to follow up with you to have that completed. But the very first one is the certification that you read the information above in the document. The second section is identifying an actual potential or no conflict of interest based on the applications or the applicants we have submitted. And note that under actual conflict of interest and potential conflict of interest, there are additional instructions if you have any that fall into that category. Actual conflict of interest, you'll provide a brief explanation, and potential, you can provide me an explanation via email. And I'll keep record of that if we determine one way or the other whether or not you should not evaluate that application. Note, though, that if you have a conflict of interest, that does not preclude you from participating. We will just make sure that you are not assigned those applications in which the conflicts exist. And then the final portion, you have your personal information, so your signature, your printed name, title, phone number, and date. Please make sure that that section is complete as well. Oftentimes things are missing there too. So just keep that in mind. And you'll return those to me via email. I will send an email out, so you can just reply directly to my email sending that back. Next slide, please. So there's a few things that you should keep in mind that you're prohibited from doing. Please do not have any contact with potential applicants during any part of the evaluation process. If an applicant contacts you regarding the RFA, please contact me immediately. Like I said, a lot of evaluators are working in this specific field. And so it's not unusual for you to be having conversations with other organizations around the work that you do in your day-to-day life. But as it pertains to the RFA, please do not have any contact or communication with anybody. Second bullet point is do not conduct independent research like internet searching. That includes opening hyperlinks embedded in the application responses as part of the evaluation of applications unless required by the RFA and directed in the review portal. So an important thing to note here is that the RFA does have language which allows applicants to reference credible sources to support their responses, but the keyword is support and not supplement. So if there is something listed that is a citation, and say it's a hyperlink, if you were to click on that and you open it and it appears to just be information which is supplementing, adding to their application, please ignore it, just close it. The RFA is just meaning to give applicants the space to show that their data is accurate, that they might be referencing. Next slide, please. Like I've mentioned, many people are working in the field and are aware of applicants and the work that they do. Please try to set that personal knowledge aside as you're going through the evaluation. The focus here is evaluating based on the evaluation matrix and based on the information that they have provided in their responses and nothing additional. Please also avoid any contact with the applicants, with other evaluators, stakeholders, media, or anybody outside of ODE and YDO staff that has specifically been directed to work with you on any of this process. And note that Once the RFA has closed, then that restriction is lifted. But during the evaluation period, that's when we really need to make sure that we are not having outside contact. It's important to note that once evaluations are complete, applicant and award notifications go out. Applicants can request their scores, but note that in our practice is not to share evaluator names with applicants. We will make the evaluator name anonymous, and it will just be listed as evaluator 123 when we share out their scores in the comments. However, note that every part of this process is governed by public records. And so if there was a public record request made for the names of grant evaluators, we would be compelled to share that information at that point. Additionally, all applicants awarded and unsuccessful have the opportunity to get feedback directly from YDO staff on ways in which they might improve their application in the future. But note that evaluator information is not disclosed during that process either. Next slide. Back to you, Cord.
Thank you, Bethany. Checking the Q&A, a couple of questions here. So there's a question probably going back to the kind of description of this particular RFA. Is there a preferred essential employability skills curriculum that applicants should be using? And no, there's not one that we designate or prefer. Applicants are free to select or develop a training that fits the description we've provided. And then another question, for conflict of interest, does it include if you have funded programs from the potential grantee in the past? And Bethany, I'll pass it to you to answer that one.
Funded potential programs in the past, likely not, as in it is in the past. However, you can list them as a potential applicant, and I can get additional information from you at that point to make that determination. And we will also just err on the side of caution. So if you're continue to be concerned after a conversation, or I continue to be concerned, then we would just mark that as a potential conflict, but refrain from having you evaluate that application. So it might not actually constitute a real conflict of interest, but a potential. We can also withhold that application from your assigned applications as well.
All right. Thank you, Bethany. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Bill Hansel, now to start talking about evaluation, general concepts.
Thank you, Cord. Good morning. I want to start off thanking everybody for being here. The work you're doing as evaluators is incredibly important to this process, and thank you. As Cord mentioned, my name is Bill Hansel. I am a grant manager and data lead for Youth Development Oregon. We're going to now turn our attention to the rubric and focus on the rubric design, some important concepts, and how to use the rubric. The slide you can see now are 3 general concepts that are very important to keep in mind when evaluating applications. We will cover each concept in greater detail. Next slide, please. All right. The concept number 1 is that each evaluation item, and there are 5 of them for the JWR application, are scored individually as standalone items and not the application as a whole. That is, each item is scored as if it were the only item being evaluated, and each score is based on the response to the specific item. Information provided in other evaluation items, and by evaluation items, it means the scored items. Information provided in evaluation items shall not be considered in determining a score for the response under consideration. Each item is scored independently, and the standalone evaluation item scores are summed to produce the application score. This concept is basically saying that information from other scored evaluation items are not to be considered in supplementing the information provided in the evaluation item under review. Next slide, please. The second important concept is that each evaluation item is scored against the rubric only and not against the responses from other applications. That is, evaluation items are not scored on a curve. For example, the best response for an evaluation item from assigned applications is not automatically awarded a 10. The score is awarded based on the rubric, not the relative standing within the application assigned. The best response for an evaluation item may earn any of the possible scores. It all depends on the assignments randomly assigned. Similarly, it is possible that all scores for a single evaluation item and all scores for all evaluation items are similar. As long as the rubric is being followed, this is not something to be concerned with. It simply indicates that all assigned applications were of similar quality, whether that is high, medium, or low. Next slide, please. The final important concept is that the rubric and rubric guidance are exactly that, guides, and can be thought of as a compass rather than a GPS. They provide a direction rather than a direct route, and the route is less important than the destination. The rubric is intended to guide evaluators to the same destination. The exact route is up to the evaluator. You as evaluator must consider both objective and subjective information in the response and use the rubric to determine a score. And that is because there is no one-size-fits-all perfect project. There is a need for evaluators to evaluate wide-ranging services and programs in these proposals within the context of the RFA goals, community, and populations being served. All right, Cord, I'll turn it back over to you for some questions.
Sorry about that. Let me get off of mute there. We do have a question in the chat, Bill. When scoring, do you recommend reading the entire application first and then to go back and score each section?
That's a good question, and we really don't have a recommendation there. You'll see as we get a little further, what we do recommend is that one application is reviewed at a time, and evaluator preference can be used at that point to answer questions, get a feel for the application, but it's really up to the evaluator.
Thanks, Bill. And it seems like maybe I think another thing to consider when you do this is that you may read the whole application and then go back to score. However, I think as Bill had noted that you're really only scoring each question based or each evaluation item is being scored based on the contents of that one response. So you're not looking for parts of the answer in any other part of the application. So when you are scoring, you're really only scoring each question, with what is there in that particular response. Did I sort of say that accurately, Bill?
Yes, you did. Yep.
All right, thank
And
you.
we will get into an actual scoring example that may help, but yeah, you said it exactly right.
All right, thank you. Well, then I think, let's see. Oh, thanks. Yeah, we got appreciation in the Q&A. Thank you for your question, Jessica. I'll pass it back to you, Bill, to continue.
Thank you. We will quickly move through these evaluation items. These are exactly the evaluation items from the JWR application. And as we do move through, please note that the evaluation items refer to a project, not the organization as a whole or a program, but the project being proposed. That each question also has a word limit, and an applicant is unable to submit a response if the response is over the word limit. What this means is that evaluators do not have to do a word count, and in an evaluation item response ends mid-sentence, the applicant themselves had to choose to shorten the response. And finally, each evaluation item also has a different point total ranging from 10 to 30 points. You see here evaluation item 1 has to do with project implementation and capacity. Next slide, please. Evaluation item number 2 is project youth population in the service area. Next slide, please. Evaluation item number 3 is the project services and activities. And this is quite detailed, so please refer to all parts of the item. Next slide, please. Evaluation item number 4 has to do with project equity and access. And then evaluation item number 5 has to do with community partnerships and supports as they are proposed in the project activities. Next slide, please. Here's a look at the rubric itself. We'll go through the various component parts. Next slide, please. What you'll note is that there are 10 possible scores, 1 through 10. 1 is the lowest and 10 being the highest. Next slide, please. Those 10 scores are divided into 5 equal categories. Exemplary being scores 9 and 10, very good being 8 and 7, category of good is 6 and 5, the fair category is a score 4 or 3, and the category for inadequate is scores 2 and 1. Next slide, please. What you can then see is that the 5 equal categories are divided into 3 subcategories dealing with completeness of response. The green is subcategory of complete is exemplary and very good. The subcategory of mostly complete here in the yellow is good, and the category in the red is subcategory is incomplete, which are the fair and inadequate categories. Next slide, please. We will now walk through using the rubric as a scoring example, and these are going to be provided in a step-by-step review. The first step is to familiarize yourself with the Job and Work Readiness Grant goals and scope, and applicant background information, which is an executive summary, organization description, and community description. These resources are provided to you in multiple places, but as my colleague Sally touched on earlier, the Job and Work Readiness Grant goals and scope not only are in the RFA, but also listed earlier in this presentation. We recommend evaluating one application at a time. This is because of the way that SurveyMonkey Apply works. It uses a split screen, and it makes it conducive to do one application at a time. And please refer to the JWR RFA and applicant background information as often as is helpful. Next slide, please. The next 4 steps are really the scoring process, and we'll cover these in greater detail. Next slide, please. So step number 2 is read the evaluation item, including numbered component parts, and then the response. Step 3, thank you. Assess the level of completeness and determine one of the 3 subcategories. So here now you've read the response and really arrive at a determination were all parts of the item addressed, and if so, assign it to one of the 3 subcategories. Again, complete, mostly complete, or incomplete. And this is based on whether or not all items of the response were addressed of the question. Next slide, please. Step number 4 then is to assess the quality of the response and based on the category criteria and determine a category. So you're now in the category area, exemplary, very good, good, fair, and inadequate. And remember, based on the assessed quality of the response, the category can be moved downward, but not upward. Next slide, please. Finally, now you're in a category. It could be any one of the 5 categories. And at that point, as the evaluator, you determine, for example, if you fell into the very good category, is it an 8 or a 7? This is primarily subjective, and that is you as evaluator really determine what the 8 or the 7 is based on your subjective interpretation of the answer. Next slide, please. All right, these are a couple scoring considerations. The first of which is the concept of completeness. And completeness is not intended to be the sole criteria for the score. Rather, is intended to serve as an initial guide and minimum qualification for a category determination. Next slide, please. Further, other concepts found in the category criteria, such as thoroughness, expertise, understanding, knowledge, and ability, are intended to capture the quality of the response. And these concepts are defined in criteria definitions, sections of the rubric guidance, which is also being provided. It's kind of a quick start guide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Both the quality and completeness of the responses are critical to consider in determining a score. If a response is not complete, the highest score it can receive is a 6. But just because it is complete does not automatically mean a score of 7 or more. For example, if all number items are addressed, but the responses are one-word responses, such as yes, no, maybe, etc., the item does not automatically receive a minimum score of a 7 because it is complete. Conversely, if a response is not complete, but the number items that are addressed are outstanding, the highest score it can receive is a 6. Next slide. Thank you. This now we're shifting gears slightly to evaluator comments. Go ahead, Cord.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I think maybe there are a few questions in the chat that kind of pertain to that last section. I thought it might be good to address them rather than move on to the evaluator comments. Is that so? I'll there's one that I answered in the Q&A box, but I'll read it and share my answer. So we had a question about whether Youth Development Oregon cut off the response with words that exceed the limit. And then they clarified if the question response has 350 words and the maximum is 300, do we just receive the first 300 words, or is that section considered unresponsive? And the answer I provided, so SM Apply is not going to allow a response that exceeds the word limit. The applicant will be prompted to edit the response if it's over the limit. It'll say you need to shorten your response. So if a response appears to be cut off, that was the decision of the applicant to submit it that way. So, in terms of word count, you're not necessarily using that to determine responsiveness. What you really want to look at is the content of what they've provided. And then, Bill, this is a great question. I want to pass this to you. So if a question has multiple items, should the points awarded be divided into even amounts between those items?
That is a good question. And I think the question does a good job of providing an illustration of the objective and subjective nature of using the rubric. And so the short answer is no, there are not further subdivisions of the component items of a question. Say, if the question is worth 10 points and there's 4, they're not each worth perhaps 2.5 points. We haven't gotten that granular. You as the evaluator will read the evaluation item and kind of be able to, it is possible that a component part of a question can be answered thoroughly in one sentence, right? Another one may be answered thoroughly and it requires a paragraph, right? But this is subjective, and that's kind of an element where the evaluator makes that call.
All right, thank you, Bill. I'll pass it back to you to continue.
All right, thank you, and thank you for these great questions. The next slide is around evaluator comments. So evaluator comments are required, and we recommend that evaluators leave a comment immediately after a score is determined so that the reasoning is still fresh in the mind. For scores of 9 and 10, there's not a really detailed requirement. Because it is requirement, it's okay because you're awarding the highest score possible to say, great response, good job, etc. And an evaluator comment guide has been developed to provide examples of comments that align with the rubric score categories. We've developed this as an assist and hopefully a helpful tool for evaluators with some examples of comments. This will be provided in a document that they can be copied and pasted from if that helps. And evaluators may use the rubric-based comment examples in whole, in part, or as a starting point. However, it's critically important to ensure that the comment aligns with the score category. For example, if the numeric score category is good, a score of 5 or a 6, do not use a comment example from a category exemplary, which is a 9 or 10. Next slide, please. All right, evaluator comments are highly valued by applicants and serve as the primary means for an applicant to improve future grant applications. Please keep in mind that comments will be made available to applicants and are subject to public records requests. Comments should pass the newspaper test, align with the score category criteria, be constructive and instructive. Please consider the information that will be helpful to applicants. What parts of the response were strong or impressive? What was missing from the response? What questions did the response generate for you? And how could the response be clearer, stronger, or more complete? As Bethany mentioned earlier, when these are requested as from the applicants, we provide the comments, but not evaluator names. It would only be at a later stage at the public records request, but that's why it's important to pass the newspaper test. And ultimately, at the end of the day, would you feel comfortable with your name being attached to that response? That should guide the type of responses that you make. Next slide, please.
All right, we're back to questions, and we've got a couple more here in the chat. So, Bill, I've got a great question here about a potential situation where how should an evaluator treat a C above in a response? So how would you treat that for issuance of points? So, for example, if the organization provides a terrific response to evaluation item 1 that happens to discuss aspects of evaluation items 2 and 3, would we deduct points for them typing C above in evaluation items 2 or 3?
Good question. And that is really covered in the general concepts. And hopefully you'd be able to discern based on the general concepts that each question is a standalone item. So if C above is being referenced, and let's say it was attached to a component part of the question for further detail, question 3.2, C above for the question, it would be, you could consider that response incomplete if they did not address it, because the C above is now referencing another answer, and each evaluation item is scored independently. So that wouldn't be allowed. It's similar to having a hyperlink in there. If they elaborated further on the answer via the hyperlink, that would be disregarded as well. It's very similar to the C above.
If I can add to that as well, the evaluation items have word limits. And so if they are saving their word limits by utilizing information they put in other sections and therefore being able to add additional information that other applicants were not able to do because they utilize their or they put their full answer in each response. That's part of the reason why we want to avoid something like a previous section, because the word limits are there to give everybody similar parameters and basis in which to answer the questions in an equitable manner.
A quick question for maybe for Bethany or Bill or anyone who knows the answer to this. I believe that somewhere in the RFA, we do indicate that each evaluation item is to be answered kind of distinctly. Can someone verify that for me?
I can verify that the rubric was provided in the answer and was provided in the RFA. And that the all of these evaluation resources are also available to the applicant. So I can't speak to what they actually understand, obviously, but I believe that they have been instructed to answer questions in that manner.
And then I think maybe the other sort of thing to keep in mind is that what you want to do is apply the same standard consistently across all of the applications that you evaluate. So I think that's probably another just sort of consideration, is that however you're looking at this, you're doing it consistently.
Really quick, Cord, I was just doing a quick run through of the RFA. Section 3.2 says application must address each of the items listed in this section, and below section includes the evaluation questions. Must address each of the items listed in this section and all other requirements set forth in the RFA. They must describe how activities will be completed. That's what I have so far. If I find anything more explicit, I'll put in the chat.
All right, thank you. And then so there's another question. Applicants understand that, right? That each question is standalone, and I will have to let my colleagues answer that one for me because I am not as familiar with this RFA. So the other question we have here is, have evaluators been assigned to one of the 3 open RFA reviews yet? I believe I volunteered for whichever was needed, and this JWR training date worked for me, but I'm still unsure if this is the RFA I'll be evaluating. Just want to make sure I review the correct RFA and information and have a sense for when I will receive confirmation. So maybe Paul, I know that you're working on assignments. You can probably see this question. Do you want to chime in on that one?
Absolutely. Thanks, Cord. So the short answer is we have assigned 2 of the 3 RFA evaluator pools. So we've assigned ROG and JWR. If you have yet to receive an email assigning you to an evaluator pool, you can assume that you will be assigned to the community investment. Also, kind of a little bit more in depth, each of these evaluations or each of the evaluator trainings, do meet the requirement as an evaluator to be trained. We would ask that you review the individual RFA materials based on the RFA that you are assigned in terms of that evaluator pool. So based on the question, I am assuming that the person has not yet received an email and should be receiving one this week for the assignment of community investment, which is the furthest to close. And I also, just a note, since I am talking, so Cora, I don't know if you saw, there is a comment from Bethany on 3.2.5 application narrative, which further clarifies that response earlier as well.
Right, let's see. I think that covers the questions we have open in the Q&A. And so I believe now, oh, sorry, did I accidentally close the presentation? I'm so sorry. I was trying to get out of the Q&A, Tanasia, if you want to. Oh, I didn't do anything to this. I clicked out on my screen. You should all still see the presentation, and I will pass it over to my colleague, Abraham, who will pick it up from here. Hey, Abe, are you there? Oh no, did we lose Abe? Oh, there he is.
He looks a little frozen.
Oh no. I can potentially start his section while maybe he's logging out and logging back in. So we're going to give you a little bit of information about SM Apply, how to log into that system and get started. So evaluators will receive an email with instructions on when they can log in to SM Apply, and that's where you're going to complete the evaluation process. If you're new to our process, then you'll receive an email to set up your account. And then after setting up your account, you'll receive the email with evaluation instructions. So for some of you who have done this before, you may just be getting an email sent to you at your current whatever address you have on file to let you know what to do. Abe, you're back. It looks like you're on and unfrozen.
Yes, I don't know what was going on. Everything was frozen. I couldn't click on anything.
Oh, good. Well, I've read the first two bullets if you want to go ahead and take it from there.
Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. I'm Abraham Magana, grant manager, and operations analyst with YDO. So you said you covered the first two bullets. Something I wanted to say also is when you log in, especially if you've never ever reviewed any of our grants, what you're going to see is this little rectangle on the right. If you've never been a reviewer, right, when you get set up, you will have one button reviewer, unless you're also an applicant on another grant, right? And when you get set up as a reviewer, you'll have two options. When it's time for you to become an evaluator, you'll end up clicking on review instead of applicant. For example, if right now you're a reviewer, you were to go in, you wouldn't see anything actually. Nothing would be assigned to you, but we'll get to in the next couple slides, you'll start seeing some screen images of what to expect. So next slide. So once you log in and you are set up as a reviewer, you'll see what kind of says there on the image, a review dashboard. And this dashboard is really where you'll start to see, okay, what RFA am I evaluating? An example there, that's a re-engagement one. If you're doing job and work readiness, it'll say job and work readiness. But that'll give you the number. You'll see how many. So in this example, on the top rectangle there, you see there's only one assigned, one grant, and it's 0 of 1, so they haven't completed any, right? And as you see, there's a start button. So obviously you click on start. After you click on that start button, you'll be taken to, again, another screen, which actually shows you in a list format the grant applications that you've been assigned, right? And next to it there, you see kind of an ID number. That's the ID number associated with the grant application. But on the left there, kind of with the red rectangle there, you'll see a circle. A blank circle means you have not even started that review of that grant application. If you have started it, right, what you will see is a half green circle. Basically, half of that little circle will be green, right? And a completed one will usually have a green check mark, right? But it's pretty much it's self-explanatory that you would click on start to actually start the evaluation. So the next slide, please. And here's kind of what you'll see. There's a lot going on here, right? With a lot of different red rectangles. You'll be taken, as Bill said earlier, to a split screen. The left is where you'll see the grant application, the part that you'll be evaluating and or reviewing. And on the right is where you'll actually be doing the evaluation portion of it. But the first couple screens that you're going to see on the left is you'll see a summary, and usually I'll just have the ID. If you don't see anything of the application on the left, just click on the top rectangle where it says application, and then it'll bring up what you need to look at. So the first series that you're going to see are the application requirements, what they're called, task 5. And what that really is doing, this part of the grant application, is just giving you an idea in context of what the grant RFA, what the grantee is. It'll cover the executive summary and just a little bit of background information about the organization, right? On the right is you checking boxes saying that you've actually not only read what was on the left, the content on the left, but that you've also reviewed this training, right? Whether you're watching it right now live or that you've seen it recorded through a link on our website, right? And what you're going to do is kind of do a matching thing left to right. So if you look on the left where it says executive summary, 50-word limit, on the right, if you scroll down a little bit there on the bigger one of the rectangles there where it says executive summary, you're basically just kind of doing a match left to right, matching the headers with the headers and checking the boxes off, right? Another thing that's also important is you'll be able to scroll up and down on both of these slides, separately. They're not synced or anything, right? As well as that center bar in the middle with looks like a few little dots. You can move that to the left and to the right to make it easier to read either the left screen or the right screen. With that, next screen, please. Next slide. Now, mind you, I know it's a different slide, but you're still going to be in the same screen. But now what you're going to do is when you're to the actual evaluation portion of your review. On the left, you'll end up scrolling down. On the right, after you've checked everything off and hit the complete button on the bottom, your right screen is going to change. And what you're going to do again is kind of doing a matching left to right match, right? So you're going to be doing evaluation item 1. Then on the left, you're going to scroll down to evaluation item 1. And then you'll see the question, right? And the response to the question. Where it says evaluation item 1 score, there'll be a little drop down there. And that's where you select the 1 to 10 score. And then there's also a section for you to comment. Something I forgot to mention also, what you will see on the right is you will have access to these evaluation guide here, right? As well as the RFA and the evaluator comment guide will be also available to you. So you won't have to look for it or anything. The link will already be provided for each evaluation at the very top on the right. And you just scroll to the top and the links will be there, as well as any instructions, as also who to contact if you have any issues or complications as well. I think, and next screen. I think that's it, I think. Yeah, any questions? You're muted, Cord.
Thank you. Are you required to comment?
So I think they are required to comment if I recall, unless it's a 9 or 10. Is that correct, Bill? Just double checking here.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, and I think in SM Apply, I think it will require you to submit a comment for each one. But as Billy
Yes.
noted, if it's a 9 or a 10, you can just put A plus. That's totally fine.
But
But we do want to have a comment. And again, I think we've kind of mentioned this. We provide an opportunity for every applicant to get feedback directly from us after this process. And so, let's say that an organization is not awarded. They'll be able to request a meeting. Usually Paul Sell, will meet directly with that organization and go through their application. And it's a lot easier for us to talk about how you could improve an application if we have comments to go along with the scores, because we can say, well, the reviewers, sort of had these reasons for why they gave you a 5 or a 6 here. So it really does kind of help that applicant to understand how they can do better, and it helps us to help them to get there. So that's why we're asking for it, for consistency and to really support applicants and continue to improve their applications.
that comment guide will be really helpful. It'll give you an idea of the type of comments. I think that will be beneficial to the applicants.
To add to that as well, what I've seen, even if an individual doesn't ask for a feedback meeting with YDD, just in receiving their scores, it's a little bit hard to understand how to improve their application just based on numbers without any kind of feedback from the evaluators. And the nature of evaluations is that there will be differences in scores across the evaluators. And it's helpful for applicants to understand why that is. Perhaps, both scores are valid, but one applicant thought that it could be approved in a certain area, and the other applicant liked what or other evaluator, was satisfied with what they saw. And those kinds of things help them understand the scores and as Cord mentioned, to understand how to improve their grants going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Bethany. Another question. So is the rubric, Abe, is the rubric available in SM Apply, where evaluators will be able
Yep.
to see the rubric?
It will be there at the top as well, along with the links to the RFA and this guidance as well.
Got it. So
And the commentator guidance as well. Yes.
for
It was
each
part of the
application.
instructions.
Okay, Thank you.
On the right side pane, on the right pane.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Cord, I'd add to that too, that may not have been made explicit, is that the evaluators will receive a resource packet. That resource packet will include like a quick start guide, the slides, the comment page that gives examples of the comments, those type of things. And it'll be available to them in multiple different areas, both on our website, in the SMA in terms of links. And those are all intended to be able to be used by evaluators to help in this process. So yes, the rubric will be there that they can use, but they'll have to link to it.
Got it. Thank you. And then the comment guide. So the sort of guide for comments actually includes a bunch of examples, which are very, very similar to the language in the rubric. So you could, for example, if you provided a score of 5 or 6, you could be using a comment from that guide that matched what the rubric says for a score of 5 or 6. What we really want to do is be consistent between comments and scores. You may, however, want to be more specific in your comment about the application, like what particular things you would want to see more of, or what you thought was difficult to understand or was missing. But yeah, so that you'll see a lot of like perfect alignment between the rubric and the comment guide in terms of what we offer as example comments. And then last question here, I think. So in order to ensure our scores are accurate and acknowledging that we'll learn as we go, can we adjust scores in the scoring system after we've completed 1 or 2 applications so we can make sure our scores were accurate once we see a few applications? I know they're not scored on a curve, but sometimes I understand the question better after seeing a few applicants answer it. So Abe, how does that work if they've already completed scoring an application? Are they able to go back and revise scores?
So what I would say is when you're going through your grant application scoring, at the very bottom, you're given the opportunity to save it. You don't even have to complete. You can go halfway or just answer one of the evaluations. At any time when you're doing your review or your evaluation, there's a save button at the bottom. You hit that save button, right? So you don't submit the score basically at the end. You just hit save, right? And you'll know that that evaluation wasn't submitted because in one of your menus, that little circle I was talking about, it won't have a green check mark. It'll just be a half green, half transparent circle. And you're like, oh, these are the ones I haven't finished yet, or these are the ones I'm saving to do later, or what have you.
Right. So once you submit a score or once you submit scores for an application, that one's locked, but you can just save it
Mhm.
after you've completed scoring and then go back later to finally submit it.
Yes. And there's a submit button. So in other words, don't submit it if you think you're going to go back and edit it.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good solution for that, for trying to do that. I think that we've
And Cord, I just wanted to comment, it kind of piggybacks off another question about, but it's perfectly acceptable. Yes, that is in terms of, it's similar to reviewing the entire application and then going back and scoring individual items. If you wanted to read a couple applications and then go back and start the process, that's perfectly acceptable. And as Abe said, just be sure not to submit, but rather save, and that will allow you to revisit the application and then confirm all your scores and submit all at one time if that's what you want to do.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Abe?
And just wanted to add, if there is an issue, you're like, oh, shoot, I hit the wrong button by accident, just contact us as soon as possible. I know mistakes happen. It's all good.
Yeah.
And
On
then
the
we can do
next slide, I
something
think we'll tell you how to do that.
better.
If we can go to the next slide, I think I'll talk a little bit about if you have such an emergency or any questions during the process. So we've got this form. There'll be a link to this in our evaluator kind of technical support page on the website, which we'll share. You go to this form and you can just put in your name, email. It asks you which type of question. So if you have a question about SM Apply, it'll flag that and let Abe know to go and look. And if it's a question more about the rubric or an application, maybe you have a concern about like maybe I've got a conflict of interest that I didn't realize or anything like that, you can put that question in and submit it. And this form is monitored by Bethany as well as some YDO staff. And we're using this so that if you just emailed one person and it got stuck in email, it might take a little longer for us to get to. This way, we have several folks monitoring and can get back to you more quickly. You are welcome to email Bethany, and certainly if you had an emergency, like you said, I've something has come up and I cannot finish my reviews. Emailing Bethany is totally great and important to do. But you can use this for any kind of just technical issue. You're having trouble getting logged into SM Apply. You have a question about how to apply the rubric in a certain situation, anything like that, use this form. And again, it'll be linked on the Evaluator Resources. And then the next slide, we're getting close to the end. So the Evaluator Resources are posted on our website. There's a page called Evaluator Info, and it'll be linked in this slide deck, and you'll also find the slide deck there. We have our rubric guide, the comment guide. We'll have a recording of this training, the training slide deck, and any questions that are we posting also the questions from these Q&As there? I wasn't sure about that. Possibly. We have a lot of stuff there, and the RFA as well. So we're going to try to make sure that you have access to anything that you need in order to make an informed evaluation. And next slide, please. Evaluator assignment. I think, Paul, maybe I think this is maybe your slide, so I'll pass it over to you for this one.
Sounds good. Appreciate that, Cord. And just on that last slide, just if we have some like significant Q&A questions that we want to address globally, yes, we would post that to the Educate or the Evaluator information page, not necessarily all of the questions. So don't feel like, hey, I can't get into SM Apply task number 2 or whatever, right? Don't fear that won't be posted on there. We'll address that behind the scenes with y'all on that work. So one of the roles that I myself and Tanasia play along with Bethany is our Evaluator assignment. And so just a couple things, and we addressed it a little bit earlier as well. So you may have noticed communications are primarily through email. We do that for documentation reasons, plus just hopefully the ease of doing that. The big request from our team working with Evaluator assignment is if you could try to get back within 24 hours, that is extremely helpful. One, we know that you're still there, and two, we can hopefully address things relatively quickly in that. So just to be on the kind of lookout, there's some upcoming emails that you'll receive after this training if you're assigned to the JWR Evaluator pool. You're going to receive a conflict of interest form. It will come directly from Bethany Moreland. It'll be myself as well as Tanasia copied on that. So we'll work to get that documented within that. And then following that, once we confirm the conflict of interest, you'll be receiving what we call SM Apply Access login, and that'll be coming from Tanasia. And then just before we go in and randomly assign evaluator to the applications for evaluation, you'll receive an evaluator training follow-up and assignment. That's going to notify you that you have applications being assigned in SM Apply to begin evaluation. Just a note, we have to have confirmation of your training. So if you're attending today, that is being confirmed. But if you're watching this video to complete your training, you do need to email us and confirm that, as well as confirm your conflict of interest form and have that resubmitted before we can assign any evaluators or any applications for your evaluation. Just a note, all assignments will be made random from that RFA evaluator pool. So we have notified you if you are in the JWR RFA evaluator pool, and from that pool, we will randomly assign you during the evaluation window. The next slide, I'll talk a little bit about some timelines for that. And then following that evaluation window, sometimes we have the need to do some emergency cleanup. Maybe an evaluator was unable to complete all of the reviews due to an emergency. Those would be reassigned in what we call from an emergency evaluator pool. And so we will put that link for you to sign up in that. So basically, if you have availability for us to possibly contact you during that emergency evaluator pool window to clean up one application or so would be great. The larger the pool, the more random assignment we can have within that. So we do ask that if you have that flexibility that you do please sign up. You can see that link there on the screen. And then the next slide talks a little bit about an approximate evaluator timeline for the JWR evaluation pool. So obviously our evaluator training for this specific RFA is today. You will be receiving that conflict of interest form over the next day or two from Bethany Moreland. And then our evaluation window currently is scheduled to begin July 10th. through July 31st, 2025. And that is a 3-week window. We are committed to ensuring that you have a minimum of 3 weeks to complete your evaluations. That may have to adjust a day or two later, depending, or a little bit later, depending on how quick we get through the other portions of assigning that's time. And then we're anticipating that finalization of evaluations window. That's when that emergency evaluator pool would be utilized. That to be from about August 4th through August 13th. And again, those are estimated. Those will be confirmed windows once we assign, and when that very lengthy informational email is sent out to you with all kinds of links and access points, as well as the evaluator assistance form link on there. So I think that is all of my parts. I'm scrolling back over the Q&A. Doesn't look like we have any questions there, but Cord, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thanks, Paul. May I have the next slide? Final thoughts. All right. Well, first of all, the rubric is your friend. Trust the rubric. It serves to provide the final justification of a score in the score category. So, we've provided this training in order to try to give you a tool that you can use for consistent quality evaluation. Using the rubric consistently minimizes a variety of biases and helps to ensure that all applications are treated equitably and fairly. And on that note, the quality of responses is not meant to address writing quality, style, or grammar, but the content of the response. So we want to keep that in mind. You may be seeing applications that are written by grant writers and some are written by program personnel, and we're not looking at trying to evaluate these based on the best written application, but on one that responds completely and effectively to address the evaluation items. If you have questions, please use our evaluator support form. And if you need to contact a person directly, please email Bethany Moreland. Her email address is there, and it'll be all over the place in the materials that we share. And with that, I believe the next slide is one that says, thank you. And we really appreciate you being a part of this. We cannot do it without you. And at this time, if you want to come off mute, if you have other questions, we'll stick around. But otherwise, this completes this evaluator training.